Hi there, Emily Midget here with you today on the Pinkfresh Studio YouTube channel, and I have some inspiration for you today using the Botanicals and Butterflies cling stamp. I have been wanting to do a no-line watercoloring video for a while now, and I thought that this would be a really lovely stamp to use because it focuses a little bit more on the foliage rather than the flowers, and flowers are my favorite thing. I always start with the flowers when I'm watercoloring, and this stamp set focuses a little bit more on the foliage. It has really large, lovely leaves. So we're going to be using the Botanicals and Butterflies cling stamp, the Nested Hexagons dies, and then I've got some fancy script words die cut with the foil plate and the coordinating dies. And right now what we're doing is we are just going to stamp the Botanicals and Butterflies cling stamp onto some watercolor paper. This is Arch's cold press watercolor paper. It's the back side of it. It's a little bit smoother, not quite as textured. And I am using Hero Art's contour ink because I'm going to do no line coloring. Now I do use my Misty to stamp this, probably I think I stamped it 4 or 5 times maybe, just to make sure that it was dark enough to show up on the video, because it's with no line coloring you want a very light outline so that it doesn't show up in your finished product. So now I am going to create a kind of a negative frame. I have taped a nested hexagon die to my stamped panel, my stamped A2 watercolor panel, and I'm just using a pencil to trace around the outside. And this is we're going to put some washi tape where those pencil lines go, and it's going to overlap with the foliage with the stamped image. So there are going to be some parts of the stamped image that are going to kind of peek out from over the top of that framed image, from that framed pencil line that we have created using that nested hexagon die. And I am just following those pencil lines and putting washi tape over that. And now what we're going to do, I've got, this is a silver black velvet paintbrush. It's a newer paintbrush, so it's got a nice crisp point to the end of it. And that is the key with no line coloring a tiny detailed image like this. I'm using Holbein Watercolors, which I find to be just really beautiful and vibrant colors. And I am using that frame as a guide for where my background will be. So I'm just gonna, this is kind of it's almost like reverse psychology for the image. I'm starting backwards to where I normally do. I'm painting the outline, or the background first. Instead of painting the image itself, I'm painting the background first. So what I'm doing is I'm laying down some color, some very intense kind of a robin's egg blue color onto my my framed area, and I'm pulling that color out with my damp paintbrush. And there's not a huge amount of room to work because I do have that busy Botanicals and Butterflies image. So there's not a whole lot of room to mess it up, basically. You just have to be really careful with that point of that paintbrush, and that for me is the key to getting a really lovely crisp image with no line coloring, is having that nice sharp point on the end of your paintbrush. Now I am zapping this with my heat gun because another key with no line watercoloring is to make sure that your wet sections do not touch. You want to work in one area with your wet watercolor and then move to another area. If you work with 2 wet sections right next to each other, their watercolor will seek other watercolor. It will bleed together, and then you will lose that crispness and that definition that we need for the image to be visible, basically. So here I'm just doing some very basic, I'm not doing anything really spectacular with the twigs and the branches that they're on. We'll save the more detailed, interesting work for the foliage itself. But so I'm just adding some brown, and then I lay down just kind of a thin strip of color along one edge of the branch, clean my paintbrush, dab it on my stamp chamois, so that there's no excess water on there, and then I'll pull that color out. But there's not a whole lot of room on that thin twig, so there's not a whole lot of area for you to really get too involved with too much shadow and shape on the twig. So there I've colored all of the twigs and the stems for the leaves. And now we're going to start working on the foliage. Now, it took me a long time to figure out how to do leaves. My initial instinct was just to add some color at the base of the leaf where it connected to the stem and pull that color out. But I've realized that many leaves have two sections to them. And so I try to treat each section of the leaf like it is its own individual petal almost. So it's got its own curvature, it's got its own shape, and so there will be shadows on both sides of the leaf. So with no line coloring, I will work with one section. So you can see on the very bottom leaf, I've added dark color to the left side of the leaf and pulled it towards the right so that it fades out and is nice and light. That's going to be the top part of our leaf where it curves up and it's closest to the light source, so there's going to be a highlight there. The second part of the leaf, we're going to we're going to go in the middle there, and we're going to put that dark watercolor in the center there and pull that color out. So it looks almost kind of like A, B, A, B on the different sections. So I'm zapping this with my heat gun to make sure that we don't have any bleeding, and then I'm going to do that A, B, A, B like I just mentioned. I'm putting the dark color down in that center, along that center line of the foliage, and then I'm going to clean my paintbrush and pull that color out so that it fades nice and organically. And that, just doing that, those two sections separately, it creates a really impressive amount of shape to that leaf. It adds definition to both of the sections of that leaf. So now I have finished layer one of my leaves, and we'll go back in a little bit and add a little bit of definition to those leaves too. We'll add another layer of color to add a little bit of extra shadow and just some extra vibrance to those leaves. So now I have, I've mixed some white watercolor with some white Holbein watercolor with it's kind of a vibrant, it's almost the same color as my fingernails, the full undiluted shade. It's kind of a fuchsia purple color, and I've mixed some white in there to make it a little bit more opaque and a little bit creamier so that it pops out more from that duck egg blue watercolor background behind. So I'm just adding color. I am, again, working in sections to keep the wet sections separated from each other. You don't want the wet sections to touch. So work in one small area, then move to an area that's not touching it. So you can see that there is some definition between each of those individual flowers. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to add a little bit more shadow to some of these little, these tiny little flowers. I don't know what kind of flower that would be. It reminds me of something that's in my backyard, and I don't know what it is. I'm not a botanist. But I'm just adding a little bit of shadow to the flowers that are kind of tucked behind the other flowers in the front. Just adding a little bit. It's a darker shade of almost like a plum purple that is a little bit more diluted, and I'm adding that and kind of pulling the color out with the clean damp paintbrush so that it fades nicely. So now we're going to add a little bit of extra definition onto the leaves. We're going to add a little bit of extra shadow. Where those leaves would be connecting to the branch would have a little bit darker, deeper shadow to it. So what I'm doing, it's kind of a gray green, a dark olivey gray green that I have pulled from my Holbein watercolor palette. And I'm just adding that to the very base of the leaf where it connects to the stem, adding a little bit of that color and then cleaning my brush and pulling it out. I'm not covering the entire leaf with that dark color because I want that to remain close to the stem and where it connects to the stem, because I want to imply that the area towards the edge of the leaf, the end of the leaf, that is lighter because it's closer to the light source. The area towards the branch is darker and more shadowed because it's more enclosed. It's more on the interior of that image. So you can see I'm pointing out how we've added a little bit of extra definition onto the flower buds that are tucked behind the ones in the front. We've added some definition onto those leaves. And the thing with no line watercoloring is you want to keep your edges crisp. And so what I'm doing here is there are some little areas on the image that I didn't do a very good job of completely encompassing those images with that blue watercolor. So there's little flecks of white of the paper that are kind of peeking through because it is textured paper, and so that it didn't get down in the paint didn't get down all the way into the valleys and the hills. So I am going with the very tip of my paintbrush. This is a very nice crisp point to this paintbrush, and I'm going around and I'm just kind of cleaning up those edges to make them nice and crisp and smooth. We want those edges to have that definition because that helps that no line image pop from that colorful blue background. I lay down that color, that deep dark blue color, clean my paintbrush, and then pull that color out with that damp paintbrush so that it fades into the rest of the color. The way that you avoid those kind of harsh lines is to keep your paintbrush damp enough that you don't get a big puddle pool of water on your painted background. So now I've finished adding some extra definition and cleaning up those edges on my my floral and leaf images. And now we're just going to add a simple sentiment. This card is busy and colorful, and you don't need a whole lot of extra for it. So I am just going to use, this is a Fancy Script Words hot foil sentiment that I have done. I did a bunch of them and I keep them in a drawer, and they're just great to just kind of pull out when I need a quick sentiment. So I've added that with some foam tape, and now I'm adding some Ocean Breeze jewels. I'm just going to adhere them with some liquid adhesive, and it just adds a little bit of extra sparkle and a little bit of extra texture to this fairly one-layer card. This one will be pretty easy to mail. So that's it for this video today. I hope you enjoyed these little tips on how to get good results with no line watercoloring. I know that that can be kind of intimidating for some people, but I hope that this helps. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thanks so much for watching. And if you liked this video, please hit the subscribe button so you can see more content from us here at Pinkfresh Studio in the future. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.